In a city that never sleeps, a lone guitarist makes his leaps. Fingers dance, strings sing a tale of a dream that feels so frail. Echoes fill the silent night. A lost love, a heart so tight. But in this cold, hard world, hope's just a fleeting word. Oh, dreams whisper, oh, dreams sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, lonely cry. In the cold, hard light, guitar soars through the stormy skies. A melody that pierces the eyes. Love's a memory, a distant dream. In this world it seems fingers glide in the fading light. A final note, a last good night. Lost in the shadows, lost in time. Dreams are all we find. Oh, dreams whisper, oh, dreams sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, a lonely cry. In the cold, hard light.
In the shadows where whispers dwell,
1.3.
slight guitar sings of love's farewell.
10-4, I just wanted to know if
Echoes of a heart once bold, now lost in the night's cold fold.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on
Secrets
the South
hidden
property
deep
T, 76 seconds
within,
of the Williams Road address.
tales of love that couldn't win. Promises made in moonlight's glow, now broken like a shattered show. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in the sky. Through the night we'll find our way, carrying secrets, holding on today. Memories of laughter and tears, in the silence they appear. Whispers of a time so true, when love was all we knew. Lost in the echoes of the past, wishing for what we had. In the dark we search for light, holding on to what we fight. Through the pain, through the night, we find strength in the fight. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in the sky. Through the night we'll find our way, carrying secrets,
21.
Throw me a card for a parking problem.
Oh, okay. Hey, everybody. All right, let me bring this off so I can hopefully get me up fully on the studio. Sometimes this acts buggy. All right, there we go. All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Hope you had a happy new year. Hope your hangover is still not lasting to this point. Now, this show, we're going to do a reaction video to Brother Counsel's video where he discusses anonymous mass lawyers' discussion on Karen Reed. And I've been on Martin's show. Martin is Brother Counsel's name. I like Martin. I invited him on this show tonight, and he was, as is always is, polite enough to reply back at length. And so let's talk for a moment as this topic just came up in chat. The topic of grifter. Is Martin a grifter? Am I a grifter? Who's a grifter? What's a grifter? Well, there are such things as grifters in this business. To me, it's pretty simple. If you're chasing the truth, if you're earnestly chasing the truth, and you're trying to cover things objectively, and that means including importing information, you're reporting information that maybe even your audience doesn't prefer. Thank you, Joe. If that's the case, you're not a grifter. I don't care what your conclusion is. So if you believe that Karen is innocent, or you believe that the state didn't prove its case, but you are earnestly and sincerely pursuing the truth, and you report everything that's relevant and important, whether it hurts her or not, then you are not a grifter. That's the key for me, is as long as you're pursuing the truth and doing that honestly and objectively. Now, I can prove that I've done that because I started out on the other side. And it wasn't an overnight thing where I switched just because suddenly I was dating someone that was different or something like that. No, I was always asking the questions, and I started asking them harder and harder. And it got to a point where Turtle Boy actually didn't like the questions I was asking and invited me on his show. And I had never done a live show at that point, not even on my own channel. So I went on the show with Turtle Boy, and actually turned out to be a civil show. His plan was to try to destroy me, but it ended up being a civil exchange. At the time, I was still fully on the fence, maybe slightly leaning at that point towards Karen being innocent, but really asking harder and harder questions. And he didn't like those questions that I was asking, but he couldn't refute the logic of what I was saying. So at the end of the day, he didn't. But as the summer went by, I kept asking more and more questions. And I'll be talking about some of this tomorrow night, too, on the Ford Ladies Show. I forget the name of their channel. So with Kerry and Tuesday and Ginny and Julie, the four something. God, I'm sorry. I'm so bad with names and stuff like that. But I'm going on their show tomorrow night to talk about some of my original covering of this case. And so eventually we reached the point of August, and of this, that was 2023, and Karen Reed hysteria was just still building at that point. And thanks, Carrie. You can put the name of the forensic room. All right, I knew it was something with 4 in it. I knew, and I was like, the 4 seasons. I was like, what is this? The 4 tops. I knew it was a 4 in it. It took me months to remember Margaret's channel's name. My memory doesn't work so good anymore. So I won't get too deeply into that. We'll save that for tomorrow night. But I'm just trying to go into it to the extent of talking about who's a grifter and who isn't a grifter. Look, if you're chasing the truth, you're not a grifter. So when I talked to Martin today, he had said, he goes, I don't mind your opinions. He goes, and I understand you probably call me a grifter because you kind of have to in social media. And I said, no, I don't have to do that. No, I'm not doing it for any part of social media. If I've called you a grifter, it's because I think you're grifting. And I do, Martin. I said because I don't think you seem like a truth seeker. You seem more like someone who just wanted to pander to that crowd. And he did understandably take offense to that word. So I don't listen to very many of his shows. So he says that he does cover this from both sides. Now, if that's the case, then he's not grifting. Now, that was not my experience when he first appeared on the scene. Maybe he does that now. I don't know. And someone in here was in chat was just saying, well, if he only has 10,000 subscribers, and I don't know how many he has, is he really? I'm the one that only has 10,000 actually. So I think Martin probably has more, but is he really benefiting? So he certainly is, because he gets clients out of this, just like Better Road now gets clients out of this, right? He gets appearances on TV. He wouldn't have had that had he not latched on to this Karen Reed wave. And he never questioned. He questioned it in one of his posts today, or was replies to me. He talked about people in social media. He was talking. Actually, we'll see it. It was in his video that he does. He's talking about people in being anonymous, like anonymous mass lawyer. Why do you have to be anonymous? He said, well, I understand sometimes because social media can be nasty in terms of going after people. But that's them. That's Turtle Boy. That's turtleism to its core, Martin. That's what they do. And you're in his corner. You're going on his show. You're calling him doctor when you know he's not a doctor. And I mentioned that to him, and he tried to make light of it. But no, you're playing up to that. You're calling him doctor. He's not a doctor. He hasn't earned that title. He's, and he's not a truth seeker. And he's not even someone that's honest with his own audience. And I pointed out how he lies to his audience. He lied to his audience for months, telling him how he was never in direct contact with Karen Reed or her lawyers. And then the phone records came out, which showed he was in multiple phone calls between him and Yannetti and him and Jackson, and pretty much daily contact between him and Karen. So he was lying to his audience for months. Turtle Boy is not a journalist. He's not someone that was seeking the truth on this. He's someone that hitched his wagon to her because he saw something out of it. That's it. And he never once chased the truth. Now, I never did that. I've always chased the truth. And if tomorrow some piece of evidence came out that tended to show that John went inside the house, I would report it. And I wouldn't just automatically react and say, "Wow, obviously that's obviously fake news." This is what Turtle Boy does. He's not actually processing any of this. I remember in September of 2023, when the state report came out that had a lot of new information in it. For instance, it had in it the GPS that showed that John never went in the house. And it also had what they called microscopic taillight plastic found within John's clothing. And I did a show that day, and I said I wanted it to be conciliatory. I said, "Look, listen, it's time to move on here. The GPS shows John didn't go in the house. Let's move on. This is it. Let's stop fighting each other, because it's crazy, because he just didn't go in the house." Now, that didn't work. But I also said on that show, I said, you're going to see tonight, Turtle Boy's doing his show. I think it was a Tuesday. I said, he's not going to tell you, his audience, he's not going to report about the plastic taillight pieces, the little pieces found inside John's clothing. He's not even going to tell his audience. And so Turtle did he had been on the show for like 2 or 3 hours, and he never did tell his audience. So he takes questions at the end. And at the end, somebody in chat said, Kevin from Yellow Cottage Tales says, you're not going to report. What about the taillight pieces? So now he had to take it on. And what did he do? He said, Trooper Proctor, of course, sprinkled those taillight pieces. So he's got no evidence for that, right? So, but he's just going to tell his audience, oh, yeah, of course, Trooper Proctor sprinkled taillight pieces from his little trusty test tube of taillight pieces onto the clothing. Now, it's absurd, but that's what he tells his audience, because he's a grifter. He's not a truth seeker. Who was the other one? This question recently came up. It was who's the one that went on Megyn Kelly's show recently? Oh, brother Counsel, the lawyer you know. And Megyn Kelly asked the lawyer you know about Turtle Boy, and he pandered to the Turtle Boy crowd basically by saying, "Well, Turtle Boy's, he's the one that got this story." but he's a reporter that reported on this story, but he's kind of rough around the edges. No, report it honestly. He was fed this story by a murder defendant. He didn't get this story as a result of some kind of journalism. He was fed the story by a murder defendant and, within days, her attorneys. And he benefited from it. Seems to have gotten a Lexus from it out of it too, right away. So, Lord, dishonestly presented this to a national audience what Turtle Boy is. That's grifting 101. There's no other way there's nothing else you can honestly call it. You're not seeking the truth. Now, Lawyer No, again, Peter is another smart guy, very articulate, does a great show. Not seeking the truth. He's not. He's pandering up to the Karen Reed audience, pandering up to the mob, lacks the courage. And this is, we live in a day and age where courage is what seems to be lacking. Courage by plainly intelligent people. So there's no question that Brother Counsel is an intelligent guy, Martin. There's no question that the Lawyer No is an extremely intelligent guy. They're probably much smarter than me. What they lack, or at least what certainly Lawyer No lacks in that situation there, was integrity and courage. He lacks it. He's pandered to this crowd. He's worked it into something. And now he's getting on the Megyn Kelly show because of it. So as far as Martin, I'll try, again, I gave him the link and I welcomed him on the show. I told him he's welcome to come on anytime. So, we'll leave that up to him. Like I said, I'm inclined to like him. And I was inclined to like him when I talked to him. When I did the show with him this summer with Kate, after the show ended, I stayed on and talked to him for about 15 minutes privately on the stream when it was over. And I like Martin. But, this thing in life where you look at people and you can like them and at the same time not like what they do. Now, I have only watched a small percentage of his shows, so maybe he does seek the truth. And I'm not being fair to him on that, so I don't know. But we'll watch a little bit of this here. And I haven't watched this. I only watched the first minutes because I wanted to know when I started it. So as I react to this, 99% of this I have not seen before. So we'll see what his criticisms of anonymous mass lawyer are. So let's we're at 8:10 now, so let's get it going. All right, so I marked this here. Where's this kind of where he seemed to start finally talking about the case, or at least a little bit about. All right. So I may speed this up a little bit at different points to get it going.
Of the arguments, which I think
it's a 45-minute show. But again, this is Martin. I forget where he's from, but he's maybe from Milwaukee or something. He's somewhere out in the Midwest, I think. And I like his style in terms of being calm and being civil and not attacking people. So there are things to like here, but we'll see if he's fair and we'll see if he makes a compelling argument. I didn't think he made compelling arguments with me and Kate. It was the way he performed it was a little bit unfair, in that he controlled all the questions. So me and Kate had to play by his rules. We didn't get to ask him any questions. So that's a little unfair. So I would love to do an honest civil discussion with Martin where we discuss the evidence and you have a fair format. So you ask a question, I ask a question. You choose a topic, I choose a topic. Okay.
To me, doesn't line up with the evidence, and which I think lawyers wouldn't make. And that's why I'm starting to.
So he's questioned whether or not Anonymous is actually a lawyer. I don't question that myself. But again, I'm not a lawyer, so who am I? But Anonymous seems to me he makes similar arguments to me, but he crafts them as a lawyer would, not as I would. I don't know who Anonymous is. I just know it's a he. That's all I know.
Doubt whether this is an actual real lawyer or not. Now, before we get into this, I do want to say that I've spoken to many, many lawyers on this case. Michigan, New Jersey, Massachusetts, actually. I've got a number of lawyers that I spoke to in Massachusetts who, by the way, do not ever want me to give their name. But they've all all the lawyers in New Jersey, Michigan, Massachusetts, every time that I've spoken to different lawyers about this case and tell them about this case, tell them about the different evidence of the case, they've all come down in the same way that I have, that they don't see that there's enough evidence to prove that she's guilty.
These are all lawyers who just don't actually know the evidence. They know what they've heard either in social media or they know what Brother Counsel has told them. That's the problem. So, but I have talked to many lawyers too, and all of them think she's guilty. But these are lawyers that have listened to the evidence. That's the difference.
So that's by and large my experience with other lawyers. When I see a lawyer that disagrees with that, I definitely want to see what they have to say, and specifically as it relates to the experts in this case. Because
just so Martin would like to have a lawyer who disagrees with him come on his show. And I really wish that somebody would step forward and do that. It's very frustrating. It is one of a major source of frustration for me on this case, is that this is a time when courage is needed. And we're not getting it from the people in the legal profession. There are too many of them, the overwhelming majority of them are afraid to step out and make their name and take on this mob. They're afraid to do it. Now, we understand why people like Betterow and Brother Martin and the lawyer you know go on the other side, because it's a path to getting a huge YouTube channel, which is a path from bringing a Melanie Little, from bringing you from an unknown small lawyer to someone who suddenly is on the map. Betterow, suddenly this unknown little guy is suddenly getting quoted in national articles. So it's been a path of success for him. But it wouldn't work that well the other way. If you took on the mob, you wouldn't get the same kind of following. So there's no real incentive for anybody to do it. But how about the incentive of doing the right thing, doing the courageous thing? Are there no lawyers left that will do that? So I'm disappointed also that no lawyers will step up and take on Brother Counsel's challenge.
As we all know, if you watch this trial, you know that the defense won this case on the experts. The experts has absolutely won the case for the defense. So I always like to see what they have to say about the experts. You know, anyone who believes that she's guilty, what do they say about the experts? So that's what we're going to be concentrating on. I will say that a lot of the argument that he points out is two main themes that he goes with. Number one is, and I'm going to call him because I don't know if it's a he or she, but I'm just going to refer to him as a him. So there's two main themes that he goes with. Number one is that he lays out that there's different theories of the case. And what he kind of does is he sets up what I like to call a trap. And if you're not a lawyer, you may very well fall for the trap. And maybe lawyers also fall for this trap. But the trap is like this. I'm going to present to you different theories. You tell me what's more reasonable. And if only one of them is more reasonable, then that is the one that you should go with, right? I mean,
this is absolutely not what Anonymous has done. I've read every one of his articles. A lot of them I've read out on the air. He's never done this. I wish Brother Counsel would take a slightly different view of this. What has gone on here is that, and when we went on the show, when I went on with Kate, Brother Counsel refused to even let us bring up any of the prosecution's evidence. He didn't want to look at it. He wanted to look at basically anything the defense would bring up, he considered reasonable doubt. And if it's reasonable doubt, that's game over. Doesn't mean she didn't do it. It just means that's it. You don't have a case. But he didn't want to look at the prosecution evidence. And you have to look at the totality of the evidence. And what Anonymous Lawyer has done has said that if you look at just the evidence presented by the prosecution that was not disputed by any defense expert, just at that evidence alone, the case is way beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, doesn't mean this game is over. Now the defense gets to present their theories and their experts. That's where the theory stuff comes in. And their theories, because the prosecution moved the needle so far past reasonable doubt, then their theories have to push it back. So let's say if reasonable doubt is 95 miles per hour, and so the prosecution managed to push it up to 98. Had they only pushed it up to 88, then the defense theories wouldn't matter. But they pushed it well up to 98. So that it becomes essential that the defense theories are enough to push it back under reasonable doubt. So they don't have to, the defense doesn't have to sell you on their theory. No one is saying that. Anonymous lawyer is not saying that. But what he's saying is that you have the prosecution has moved the needle well past it. And then the defense theories are so absurd, which they are, that they don't move the needle back at all. That's really what he's saying. Now, that's my metaphor that I use there. But that's really what he's saying. It's not like he's saying pick from your favorite theory. No, he's never done that. He's never done that. So that's just this is a trap set by Brother Counsel, which is false.
You're just making a reasonable decision here. If that's what you do, you just lay out here. Here's 3 different theories. Either there's a crazy conspiracy theory involving the entire police department and involving 9 people in the house, all lying, all having to get their stories straight, and the lawyer and the police officers all planting evidence and lying on things. You want to believe that, or do you want to believe this theory that she hit him? And we also have data showing that corroborate her hitting him. What are you going to choose? And this is a common line that I see brought up all the time, and it's brought up with me too, which is why.
All right, I can already tell this is going to be silly, brother. I'm sorry, Martin. This is going to be very silly. We'll give you a fair chance. I'm going to keep playing this through. But what you're describing is every single trial in the history of the country, in the history of the world. In every single trial, you have a prosecution theory about what happened, and then the defense proposes alternatives. You're making it sound like this is something unique here. What trial have you ever seen that didn't happen? That's every trial, literally, in the history of trials. I mean, I don't really understand what you're trying to say here. It's crazy.
Very often, when I get asked the question, well, how do you think John O'Keefe died? My answer to that is, well, I mean, I know the physical injuries, obviously, but what circumstances led to his death? My answer is, I don't know. I wish I did. I just don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's some of that, some of the other thing. I can't commit to one specific theory because I don't know. If there'd be more evidence, maybe I would know, but I just don't know. And that's my answer, basically. And that's how you get out of the trap. You don't have to pick a theory. And if a lawyer's presenting it to you, I mean, if your lawyer's being honest about this, then he shouldn't just say, well, which theories make sense? If you're presenting this case to a jury and you're trying to be an advocate, you may do that. But if you're trying to be honest and objective and you're trying to say, look, I looked at the evidence in this case and there's only 3 theories and this is the only theory that makes sense, that's not necessarily true, because there could be other possibilities and theories that we don't know. We don't know other possibilities because we just don't know. There's just not enough evidence. There's not enough of an investigation to make that determination. So that is one theory that's one theme that he works with here. That
if this doesn't get better, instead of calling Martin a grifter, I'll give that up. I'm just going to say it's weak. He's weak. This is weak. This is disappointing, actually. I thought it was going to be a little bit of an intellectual challenge, but this is kind of weak.
Trying to debunk all the other theories, which therefore you're left with only one theory that she hit him, because all the other theories are ridiculous or whatever. So that's one theme. And then the other theme here is that, there is a lot of data, right? So you definitely have some data, some text stream data and some of the phone data and some of the witness testimony that corroborates the data, so that, which shows that her car, Karen Reed's car, did go backwards 24 miles per hour. So that did happen. And if you want to be honest, that was largely uncontradicted. Her car.
All right. So this is the evidence that Martin doesn't want to look at for some reason. This is just so weak. It's stunning to me. This is the problem, I guess, where he's not a trial lawyer. I don't know what kind of law he practices, maybe injury law or something. And I'm not trying to slight him. He graduated law school. This is not a dig at all. But certainly what he's describing is every criminal trial in the history of the country, right? I mean, the prosecution is presenting a jury their theory about what happened, about what the defendant did. So I don't really understand. I don't get what he's saying here. I mean, of course, that's what they're doing. And Anonymous is saying that the prosecution's theory is overwhelmingly convincing and the defense is absurd. And he explains it why. I hope this gets better.
Or did go backwards at some point 24 miles per hour. So, and it was around the time that she dropped off John O'Keefe. And that, again, that went uncontradicted. So that's very, very strong data.
So he admits this here. Good. It's not just it was around the time, Martin. It was within seconds. All right? Within seconds. So just the old thing, it just leaves no other possible explanation. Just to rehash it, in case you happen to be watching, brother, because I know you might not like this evidence, but Karen Reed John got out of Karen's car. We know the exact time because the phone temperature dropped 10 degrees. And so this was at 12:31:56. Exactly 20 seconds after that, John's phone moved for the last time. That phone was found underneath John's body. It didn't move again until it was picked up in that morning after John was put on the ambulance and Kerry Roberts found it on the ground. All right. So it, for all intents and purposes, it stopped moving exactly at 12:32 and 16 seconds. That's a hard data line that nobody disputes. It didn't move after that time. All right. 20 seconds before that, John got out of the car. Now, in between that is when Karen went in reverse at 24 miles an hour. So what do you think happened, Brother Counsel? I mean, you can't say you don't know. This doesn't leave room for other explanations. You can say you don't know exactly how it happened. What position was John standing? Was he moving? But there's more evidence from this same data that was indisputed. We know that John had on Waze on his phone to get directions there. It's very accurate data. And they missed a turn from Cedar Crest onto Fairview at 12:23 and 46 seconds, I believe, or 48 seconds. And because of that, they had to do a 3-point turn. And now they come back and they make the now right-hand turn into Fairview, and that's at 12:24 and 18 seconds. So the 3-point turn was in the middle of that. And that was determined to be plus or minus a couple of seconds at 12:24:02. Now, I made that determination myself during the first trial based on that data, based on very simple data that really can't be refuted from the Waze. And Burgess, working for the prosecution, did it much more accurately, but he came up with the same, and for more accurate reasons, more technical reasons, but he came up with the exact same time I did, 12:24:02. So 12:24:02. Now, what else? Now, that's a time when she does a 3-point turn, and because of because she had hit the accelerator in reverse at over 30%, that caused a trigger in the text stream data. This is the first trigger event in the history of the car. So you generally only get trigger events from a car accident or an extreme action like that, and punching it in reverse at 30% was an extreme action. So now it's an important thing to remember once you got that time, because 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that, she triggers another event when she again punches it in reverse, getting it up to 23 miles an hour, 24 miles an hour. Well, so 12:24:02 plus 8 minutes and 4 seconds, that gives you 12:32 and 06. And where is John? He's outside of the car now, because we know we get out of the car just 10 seconds before that. Now, the way the text stream data works, it takes a snapshot 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after the event is triggered. So sometime within that 5 seconds after, or possibly a couple of seconds after that, since we don't know it, because she never hit the brakes. Well, she hit the brakes at some point, but she didn't hit the brakes within that 5 seconds of data. So if it was 4 seconds into the data, as Trooper Joe Paul determined, then that would put the collision at 12:32:06 plus 4 seconds. So 12:32:10. Now, if it's like anonymous masked lawyer believes that he did it that the collision was a couple of seconds after the end of that 5-second data, then that would put it 3 seconds after that, which would put it right around 12:32:11. And this is pretty much close to, it's within a second or two of what I put on my chart that I put together after the first trial. And I put in there minus, say, 2 or 3 seconds, because you couldn't know exactly when it happened. But so Karen Reed puts it in reverse after John has got out of the car, within that short window, and before his phone stops moving. This is data that the defense did not dispute. Brother Martin does not dispute it. You can't just dismiss it. You can't just walk away from it and say, but what about butt dials? You can't. So we know for sure that Karen, seconds before John's phone was to stop moving, was in reverse in the same vicinity. Now, there's going to be other evidence here, but that puts you right there. You're like, all right, it's crazy to think anything else happened. What else could have happened? And then now you look at the other evidence, such as the broken taillight pieces, the microscopic taillight pieces found, or small pieces of taillight within John's clothing, the broken cocktail glass, the glass on the bumper. You start looking at all this stuff, and you realize, yeah, there's more than enough evidence there, way beyond reasonable doubt, that John was struck in that moment. And to that, you have defense theories that, yes, are utterly absurd and make no sense. And this is all anonymous lawyer has said. Let's get back to Brother Counsel and see if he improves a little bit.
Showing, or to prove, if you will, that Karen Reed actually was guilty. So you've got some data pointing to Karen Reed's guilt. And if you ignore that, then you're being disingenuous. And I've never ignored it. So yes, there's going to be data that way. The question always is, what are you going to do with the data showing the other thing? That's always going to be the question in this case. Yes, you've got her car going backwards 24 miles per hour. Is that all you need? Because for certain people, that's all you need. He was there. She was there. Her car went backwards 24 miles per hour. I don't really care about the rest. I don't care what the ARC experts say. I don't care about Marie Russell. I don't care about anything, because that data is just so strong that tells the whole story. And that's the end of the discussion.
You have to put it all together. Nowhere is anonymous. See, he's putting. This is the thing is, you can't put words in other people's mouths. And please don't let me do that to Martin here either. I don't want to put words in his mouth. And this is what he's doing with anonymous mass lawyer. He's anonymous mass lawyer. I've read every article. Has never said anything so simplistic as bang. Karen went in reverse, so therefore guilty. No, he's never said that. So what you're saying is very unfair to him. It's ridiculously so.
And then what happens is that if that's your position, that data is so strong that there's nothing in the world that can convince me out of that position, well, then that's where we end up with these articles, because that's another very strong point of his, that, look, you've got that data, and any other data, it doesn't.
It's the data that I gave, not the simplified version that Martin just gave. It's the totality of the data that you have to look at, combined with the other evidence.
Really just falls to the wayside because that data is so strong. So we're going to pull up again the article here. We're not going to go through the entire thing because it's like 38 pages, but we're going to be concentrating just specifically on what he does with the defense's experts, because that's, I think, to me, the most interesting part of the analysis here, definitely from a lawyer's perspective. How does a lawyer analyze? If you think that she's guilty, what do you do with the ARCA experts? What do you do with Dr. Lapasada? What do you do with Dr. Marie Russell? All right, so let's pull it up and let's go through it. So this is it. This is from the Substack. It's publicly available. Anyone who wants can go read it. I'm maybe doing him a favor.
And I'll just answer myself here, since I'm not sure. But what I would do with the ARCA experts and Dr. Marie Russell is pretty simple. First of all, with the ARCA experts, they really didn't say as conclusively as people want to suggest that John could not have been struck by a vehicle. They never said that. But also, the biggest thing for me is you can't dismiss the fact that experts show up in high-profile trials all the time that say things that just aren't consistent with the evidence, because they've basically been bought or they are biased for one reason or another. Now, in this case here, when I have said that when I said before for the last year that the ARCA guys were clearly, in fact, when I was in Dedham after the first trial, and we were divided, we were in front of the courthouse, and there was probably about 100 people in the blue shirts and 1,000 people in the pink shirts and in the middle in front of the courthouse is a kind of brick area that was no man's land, and it was policed by the Mass State Police to make sure nobody was getting into fights from the crowd. But I was getting bored, so I walked over into the pink shirts, the sea of pink shirts. And when they noticed me, Brian LTL and one of the other YouTubers pulled out their cameras and went live and everybody started bombarding me with questions. And LTL said, "Are you a flat earther, Kevin? Are you a flat earther?" he says, "What do you say about ARCA?" I said, "You know what?" And they were all throwing questions at me, and it's an angry crowd, right? I said, "What do I say?" I said, "Listen," I said, "those ARCA guys are some of the most qualified scientists, accident reconstructionists that you could have." And all of them, their jaws dropped. It was perfect because that was the best way to silence them, because they were not expecting me to say that. But it's true, they are qualified. I said the problem was not with their ability. The problem is with their integrity. And what I said clearly they had taken their cues from a federal government who hired them, that for some reason wanted Karen to win. Now, this was all the evidence back then, right, that we could see. There was, the fact that the unusual communications between Karen's team and the U.S. Attorney Josh Levy and a whole bunch of other stuff, that it was clear the way they left the investigation go open for so long, even though they weren't really looking into anything anymore, it was clearly just to help them. The irregular communications with Karen's team, the way they refused to respond to the O'Keefe family, they refused to respond to pleas for help from the defense witnesses. From the prosecution witnesses who are going to be testifying before a federal grand jury. There was something really, really odd here. And we learned more later about more odd things, but no need to go into it too much now. And of course, now one of these guys has left the office and is running for Morrissey's seat as DA. And really, he has a lot of questions to answer. He's ground zero for the wrongdoing that clearly went on here between the federal government and Karen Reed's team. But then we learned in April, before the second trial, that the U.S. Attorney's Office was violating the sequestration order and communicating to Dr. Wolf of ARCA what the prosecution's expert witnesses were saying. Dr. Wolf knew that was wrong. He knew it was a violation of sequestration. He testifies in multiple trials a year. So clearly what was going on here, that's the smoking gun. That's the evidence here. The federal government was siding with Karen Reed. They were actively trying to help Karen Reed. We don't know why. We may never know why. All right? And unless there's an actual earnest investigation into this by the federal government, we probably will never know why. But something dirty was going on and have been going on for a long time there. So when you ask me, what do I say about ARCA? I say they were dirty, and that's proof of it. And this is far from the first trial. Go back to OJ and many other cases, and I'm doing a book on this coming out called Strange Witnesses. There is no shortage of examples of experts that end up testifying for a lot of money or some other interest in that. And that's what happened here. And similarly with Dr. Russell, weird circumstances. She's a fan of true crime. She's been retired for a number of years. She's out of the limelight. She's out of the juice. She's like, her life is bored. She used to be head of the ER in a Los Angeles hospital and had been retired for some time. And she had some connections to the Los Angeles Attorney's Office, where Alan Jackson worked as a prosecutor for many years. And who'd she reach out to? A friend of Alan Jackson. What was the actual communication there? Who reached out to who? We don't even know. Alan Jackson said in the first trial during a voir dire to the judge, what difference does it make? So something weird went on there. And suddenly, out of the thin air, they couldn't get any experts that would testify that these were dog bites. Nowhere. But then in the middle of the first trial, Dr. Marie Russell emerges. Again, there's just a weird way, and she was totally unprepared. She hadn't looked at any evidence that she didn't want to look at. For instance, she didn't look at the DNA evidence in that first trial. And then the rest is just arguing when she testifies in the second trial, she's improved her argument with the help of Alessi, the defense lawyer that Karen Reed hired, that is a specialist in preparing defense expert witnesses. And so she had come up with something she didn't have before, for instance, a methodology. She had come up with it. But she was clearly, for whatever reason, trying to be a hero to that crowd. Look, it happens in famous trials. So to me, yes, that's how I dismiss that. Now, I don't dismiss it. I don't dismiss your qualifications. I don't just automatically take her evidence and throw it out the door. No, what I do is I look at the totality of the evidence from both sides. And so if the evidence, for example, had been weaker on the prosecution side, then I might say, well, maybe she really does believe these are dog bites. But since no other experts were coming out and saying this about dog bites, and they don't rationally look like dog bites, if you look closely, they were described by the original medical examiner as shallow abrasions. That's not what's made by claws. All right. So if you look at them really in a glance, you say, oh, they're parallel lines. That's what a dog makes. But it really doesn't make sense that they were dog bites. And but again, if the whole thing hinged on dog bites, you could say maybe they were, maybe they weren't. You could say reasonable doubt, but it didn't. You looked at that and said, this is just kind of suspect testimony. Meanwhile, you have this testimony on the other side that is irrefutable. Even Brother Counsel isn't refuting it. So that's how I dismiss those. I don't know. Maybe at some point, Anonymous will speak for himself on this.
Favor by promoting him on this. So again, it's Anonymous Lawyer. I believe that's the handle. And you can find the Substack from here. So here we go. In the second trial, the defense didn't even bother trying to tell a story because it was impossible to tell a coherent one. But they wisely doubled down on their expert strategy, bringing in credentialed and articulate medical and scientific experts who were willing to state authoritative conclusions that went far beyond what their testing or the science warranted. Now, objectively, that is false. That's not what happened. If you are a layman watching this trial and you've heard enough of
all right, I was looking at chat. I gotta
replay
that a little bit.
But they wisely doubled down on their expert strategy, bringing in credentialed and articulate medical and scientific experts who were willing to state authoritative conclusions that went far beyond what their testing or the science warranted. Now, objectively, that is false. That's not what happened. If you are a layman watching this trial and you've heard enough of the noise from the anti-Karen Reed side, then you may make this argument. If you're a lawyer, you're an objective lawyer looking at this trial and you watch this trial, you would never come to this conclusion. They've never stated conclusions that went beyond their testing. Actually, in fact, they said exactly what their testing showed. And assuming that their testing that they're talking about is the ARC experts, because that was really the only testing that was done here. And the ARC.
Well, we'd have to go back and relive the ARC testimony for not only both trials, but multiple voir dires. Anonymous mass lawyer may be referring more to what ARC testified in the first trial, and Brother Counsel probably didn't watch the first trial. So I'm not sure. We'll let Anonymous speak for himself. But in the first trial, there's no question that ARCA stated conclusions that went beyond what their testing was. There's no conclusion that that's what happened there. They 100% did do that. They even strangely, Dr. Rentschler, I remember him testifying, and this to me was, back then I was suspicious that someone had told him what the prosecution's theory was in the case, which had only come out through Trooper Paul about the spinning thing. And I was like, how? And he got up there and he did this with his arm. And I said, but nobody was saying that John's arm was like this. But it was really kind of fraudulent the way Dr. Rentschler did it, because no one said that John was standing here with his arm held straight out and it got whacked. he more than likely had a more defensive position, something like this, that protected his elbow, and then it snapped back and created the dent in there. But no, I do think it's true that in that first trial, now they did more testing in the second trial. Ironically, some of the testing that they did, that video kind of tended to be very helpful to the prosecution, because it showed exactly the way that taillight glass could break at that lower speed and smash into different pieces. But I certainly don't think that this is the idea for him to say, or no lawyer would say that. No, I don't. Again, I don't even think, based on your earlier arguments, Martin, that you've ever watched a criminal trial, even on TV, even on Law and Order.
Our experts simply stated that it's inconsistent. That's all they said. The testing shows that the interaction is inconsistent. That is what they said. That was their opinion. How did that opinion go beyond their testing? That was what their testing was for. Okay, so when you see these type of arguments being made, this is where I start to think, is this a lawyer talking, or is this somebody pretending to be a lawyer using all the same talking points that we keep hearing from the...
Like I said, Martin, couldn't we say the same thing about you when you strangely described how it's a trick to talk about the theories? And which is it here? Is an anonymous masked lawyer using a lawyer's trick, but he's not a lawyer? Which is it?
Anti-Karen Reed side. All right, let's move on. In particular, these experts were successful in planting the idea with the jury that unless the prosecution can prove through scientific testing the exact mechanics of the alleged collision, nothing else matters. And this is, again, building a straw man here. This is building a straw man where you have to prove, because this is the reality that he wants to create here, that you've got to prove, the prosecution has to prove the exact mechanics of the alleged collision. And if they don't do that, nothing.
I think that was 100% Sue. That is and I think even to Brother Martin, if you don't prove to Martin exactly the mechanics of the accident, then he's going to say that's reasonable doubt. And that's the same with Peter, what's his name, that I used to be on Court TV, would say. This is what defense lawyers are trying to say. It's reasonable doubt. It's a misuse of the concept of reasonable doubt, because you don't have to prove you don't have to prove right down to every single element as to exactly what happened in a crime. If you have someone that the gun goes off and you run in the house and you see a gun on the floor and you see a man standing there and his wife, the woman, is shot dead, you're getting to a point where you pretty much understand that he shot her. Especially if he has gunpowder residue on his hands or something like that, right? I'm just trying to give an example. I'm sure there are better examples. You didn't see what happened, but you ran in seconds later and you saw the result. And maybe there's more evidence too. For instance, maybe we find evidence that his story doesn't make, the husband's story doesn't make sense, or he's caught lying or something. I mean, he certainly isn't going to be able to, if the husband tries to argue that somebody came off the street and shot her and then tossed the gun, that's probably a jury's not going to buy into that, right?
Nothing else matters. Now, that's not what happened here. Not at all. Not in the slightest. All the prosecution has to do in this case is to show some consistency. That's it. You don't have to show the exact consistency.
Which they certainly did.
The exact ways that every single injury happened. Just show us some consistency. Show us a little bit of a bruise. Show us a little contusion. Show something, some sort of injury from the neck down. You don't.
All right. So, and I do always admit that the prosecution in this case faced an uphill battle. I think I've been in the only one on, maybe on both sides, certainly on this side of the aisle, saying this, that the prosecution had an uphill battle in some sense, because you had no witness, no videotaping of what happened. You have the state claiming that it's a hit and run, and yet you have very limited injuries to John. You have a small contusion on the right knee. You have some bruising on the right hand. You have shallow abrasions on the right arm, and that's it. You have the head injury and a couple of small injuries on the face. And you have the head injury, which was, the state says, was not caused by the vehicle. So that's an uphill battle for the state. Now, did they prove it? Yes. But for all the other reasons I said, that puts, just like I said, you got the man shoots the woman and the gun is right there on the ground. You walk in the room a couple of seconds later, at some point, you don't have to know exactly how things happen to know that it happened. And there are probably better examples of that. But so you can still convict someone on that. And the state certainly has done that here. But that doesn't mean they've explained every injury. No. And the theory they have is that he was swiped in some way, and it was enough to scrape his arm, and it launched him out, and then he fell and hit his head on the ice. I mean, on the frozen ground. So I don't think what Brother Counsel says here is accurate.
Don't find it. So no, this is not that you have to prove the exact mechanics. You just have to prove some level of consistency. Some. That's it. That's all we're asking for.
And they did.
And that perhaps would have been enough. Okay, so this is, again, I don't think that a lawyer looking at this would make that type of conclusion here. Let's continue. The problem with that argument is that it creates an impossible standard, one that, if accepted, would essentially make it impossible to ever convict anyone of a hit and run absent video footage or direct eyewitness testimony. Okay.
And this is somewhat of a problem that's being talked about. I've seen other lawyers talk about this, not even regarding this case, but they call it the CSI effect, right? The lawyer, I forget her name. She has a pretty good channel. Sorry, the name will come to me eventually, but she's talked about this CI effect that apparently prosecutors it's well known to them, that it's a problem with juries now is they've seen too many TV shows and they expect everything to be wrapped up nice and neatly in a little bundle, with scientific evidence and an absolutely concrete theory. But that's just generally not the way it works. And so this is something that lawyers do talk about. And Brother Counsel would know that if he was a trial lawyer.
Okay, so now this is another straw man. What's the straw man here? Well, you're never, ever going to be able to convict anybody of a hit and run, of any hit or run, unless you have video footage or direct eyewitness testimony, right? And every single day in the courtrooms of many jurisdictions, people are being convicted on circumstantial evidence without direct eyewitness testimony. It happens every single day. Okay.
Exactly.
So are we now going to say that that's impossible when it comes to hit and run? You cannot use
That's not what he said. What he said is, if you were to argue the way FKR is arguing, if you were to raise it so that then you would never be able to get a conviction. He's certainly not saying that there's never been a conviction or there never will be a conviction again. That's not what he's saying. He's saying in this case here, the defense has managed to play this trick on the jury and on the audience, where people think that you have to explain every aspect of what happened. That's so. Come on, brother, raise your game a little.
Circumstantial evidence. You'll never be able to prove any sort of hit and run. And the answer to that is no. This is not a problem. If a lawyer is saying this as a problem, you're not a lawyer. Okay, because it's very, very clear to anybody, and this sounds again like a very big talking point of the anti-Karen Reed side, that this is just a regular hit and run accident. This is just a classic. This is a classical hit and run accident. Now, you saw, actually, if you watched the trial, this lawyer's saying he did apparently. If you watched the trial, you saw actually what a victim.
I think actually what we say is that the police treated this as a regular, ordinary hit and run accident, and that might explain some of their actions in those days. I think that's all we've said. But go ahead.
Victim of a hit and run looks like, or what a victim of a car accident looks like. Bruised all over, broken ribs. That guy was
okay. That's all right. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So when I first began investigating this, and again, I was then on the other side, but I talked to a lot of cops. And the cops I talked to, none of them were accident reconstructionists, but all of them were people that at various parts of their career had seen victims of hit and runs or victims within the cars. And one of the things that's impressed on me that they all said, 100% of them, is that it was amazing the variety of the injuries. I remember one guy saying that he had come across the road. This was my friend Dave from Ohio. And this 12-year-old girl had been the victim of a hit and run. And it just really, one of the things that really shocked him and bothered him was that she looked like she was uninjured. She was just like lying there, beautifully, like she was taking a nap, but she was dead. But other times there are accidents where, yeah, it's gruesome. And this is the same thing. Every cop has told me some version of that kind of story, where inside the car, there'll be people that are gruesomely hurt and other people that look like they're just going to wake up in any second and they're dead. So if Brother Counsel wants to go out and talk to actual police that do this work, and any brute cop has experience with that, they're all going to tell him that. But you got to make the effort, brother.
Was messed up, unfortunately. Very sad. But that's generally what you're talking about when you hit and run or any hit. You're talking about a hit from a vehicle, you're going.
Again, I'm not an expert on hit and runs, but Brother Counsel is presenting himself now as an expert on hit and runs. He apparently knows what these injuries always look like. That's what he's saying. Now, you're going to doubt Brother Counsel if anonymous mass lawyer is a lawyer. Well, I'm going to doubt, I've doubted you're a trial lawyer from the start of this video, but I'm also going to doubt that you're an accident reconstructionist as you're pretending to be here.
Going to see bruising. So no, the problem with this case is not that, well, this is just any regular hit and run. And this is, again, this is the way that they package it for you, which is why if this is a lawyer, I don't know why he's trying to package it the way that all the anti-Karen Reed people do it. This is not a classical hit and run. This isn't. That's the problem. That's exactly the issue in this case. It's not a classical hit and run. The problem with this case is that there is testimony, expert testimony, and evidence that he was never hit. That's the problem. That's why it's not like a regular hit and run accident. If you got a regular hit and run accident, you got a car flying down the road.
No one has said it was a regular hit and run accident. First of all, most hit and run accidents are from the front. This was someone that was a reverse, or at least the accusation by the prosecution is that it was the car going in reverse. So right away from there, you're not going to see a normal. Normally, because the injuries come from the front, the injuries are to the legs. But that's not going to happen in reverse unless it's the kind of, well, not with an SUV. It would happen in reverse with a car that has a trunk, but not with an SUV, because there's not a, you don't flip over the trunk or over the front. You're flipping over the hood and going onto the windshield. This is not one of those cases. So automatically, this is going to be a different kind of injury than what most medical examiners are going to look at in a hit and run. Everybody knows this, though, Brother Counsel. Nobody. So you put up a straw man here that people have said this was a classic hit and run. Nobody says that. This was a different case.
And you don't see exactly, but then another guy ends up dead, and you see he's got broken ribs and he's hemorrhaging and he's bruised and he has contusions and he's broken bones and broken ligaments and tendons and all that good stuff. Then no, you don't need video footage.
The broken ribs were from the CPR. The hemorrhage was from the hypothermia. This was all in expert testimony in the trial.
Sorry, you don't need it. So if you make this comparison, that's where it starts to strain credulity that you are actually a lawyer making this argument. Okay, this is what I've heard from people that are not arguing.
Again, so now he's going on multiple times about not being a lawyer, and this is where I have to kind of use the G word, Brother Counsel. I have to go with grifting. Just take on the argument. Take on the argument, which so far you've done very weakly. You've misattributed quotes to him, arguments that he's made, and you keep going back to this idea that he's not a lawyer. Forget about that. Just take on what he said. If you can't do that, it's weak.
Not lawyers from the other side, but okay, let's move on. What's ironic is that the prosecution in this case actually took the highly unusual and expensive step of hiring well-respected external crash reconstruction and medical experts, and were repeatedly criticized by the defense and in the media for the costs involved in doing so. But as Dr. Welch, the prosecution's crash reconstruction and biomechanical expert, correctly explained, while the digital and physical evidence can tell us with a high degree of logical and scientific certainty that John O'Keefe was hit by Karen Reed's SUV, there's no practical way of determining the exact mechanics of the collision. And again, this is coming back to the other argument. And we're going to keep seeing this theme also. Well, you can't prove the exact mechanics, every single little detail of this, how this.
See, Brother Counsel, if we rewind this, I'm not going to, it's about 4 minutes. He says the exact same thing, that you don't need to prove the exact mechanics. It's like he forgot he said it.
Happened. We can't prove it because there's so many different variables. How are we supposed to prove it? You're right. We don't need to prove every single detail. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is show some level of consistency that this
Which
body
is exactly what they did, looking at the totality of the evidence, which includes the data, which includes the taillight pieces that were reassembled and belonged to Karen's Lexus, which includes the fact that there was no time to plant those pieces. All that is part of the totality of the evidence. You can't ignore that.
he actually interacted with the Lexus. That's all you have to do. No one's saying that you have to show exactly.
Well, we have plenty. You have DNA found on the taillight housing. You have pieces of taillight plastic found, microscopic pieces found within John's clothing. So you're going to pretend there's none of that happened, I guess. But you're saying like there's no consistent. No, there was a very consistent pattern of what happened here. The only thing they don't know is exactly where John was standing and exactly how those injuries were made. That's the only thing they don't know.
Exactly how many feet he was hit and turned around and spun around and what angle. You don't have to do any of that.
Good.
And again, I think any lawyer should look at this case and understand that. All they were asking them to do is to show some level of consistency, which they didn't do.
Which they certainly did. And again, you just keep repeating that, brother, but they certainly did. And there's no question that Alan Jackson did try to, especially when after Joe Paul in the first trial, make a bones about exactly how far John traveled after being struck. Was it 15 feet? Was it? Yes, they were exactly doing that. So what you're saying they didn't do, Alan Jackson did do.
All right, moving on. The reason for that is pretty simple to understand. There are far too many unknown variables here to allow for meaningful testing. We can't possibly know precisely where John was standing when he was hit, what position his body was in, how fast the SUV was moving, what direction the vehicle was moving relative to his body, or where precisely the vehicle made contact with his body. There are almost infinite permutations possible, and slightly tweaking any of the variables can result in wildly different outcomes. Again, this is trying to show, well, you can't show every single detail. And again, nobody asked you to. You don't have to show every single detail of this case. You just
certainly the defense did. Yes, they did, but
just have to show some consistency.
Which they have.
Mr. Lawyer. All right, moving on. There are almost infinite permutations possible and slightly too, okay, we did this. And it is not remotely feasible for the DA's office to purchase a fleet of $90,000 Lexus SUVs and to keep running tests until they get it right. The defense, which had far more resources to spend on these things, which is probably the biggest joke in this Substack, that the defense had more resources to spend on these things. No, the DA's office just spent
the defense also had the most powerful resource in the world, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal government.
$1.5 million. The defense has a lot more resources than them. Anyway, okay, let's move on. Ended up destroying their example Lexus in one of their poorly designed tests in which the crash dummy was struck in a way that no one has ever alleged John was. If this kind of trial and error testing is needed in order to convict someone of a hit and run, would ever be convicted of that crime? Again, going back to the same straw man, well, then you can never convict anyone of a hit and run because you're going to always have to buy the same exact model and of the vehicle and run all these tests to show hit and run. But obviously, that's obviously wrong. I mean, it's obviously wrong because this is not just a classical hit and run. That's the problem here. But if a lawyer's writing like this, it just makes me question that. Okay, even doing one such test would be prohibitively expensive in almost all normal situations, much less the hundreds of thousands of tests or thousands of tests it would take to control for all the variables here. And again, it's just missing the point. It's like it's so badly missing the point. It questions whether this is, how can this be a lawyer? Well, let's move on. By contrast, the defense experts ran a handful of tests while subtly tweaking the variables in ways that favored their preferred outcome, and simply opined that the results were inconsistent with the damage and injuries actually observed in this case. So, again, while subtly tweaking the variables in ways that favor the preferred, what is he talking about? What did they tweak to favor their preferred outcome? They literally took the data that everyone's the other side was, the tech stream data that she was going 24 miles per hour. They ran that test. They ran the test of her going backwards
Yeah, but they also the positions that they put the body in and the dummy arm and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that you can do to try to control this. What position the arm in, was it really holding still out like this? No, of course not. But that was the test that they did. So
at very high speeds, even less speeds than 24 miles per hour. Right? They ran all these speeds, did all these tests, trying to recreate the theory of the prosecution. So how exactly did they tweak the variables that favored the preferred outcome? Like, is this an objective lawyer looking at the facts and evidence in this case, or is this an anti-Karen Reed person writing this advocacy?
what do you, Martin? Again, I do believe you're a lawyer, but I'm just not seeing a lot of evidence of it here. You're certainly not a trial lawyer. You're not actually a defense lawyer. And you don't seem to understand the logic of how trials work. So I don't really understand why, because this is basic stuff. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand that this is how trials work.
Paper and pretending to be a lawyer. I mean, this is where you start to think like, this is not really a lawyer writing this. And simply opined.
All right. You know what, guys, I'm going to have to stop here because I can only listen to him say so many times the same thing over and over again, that this is not a lawyer. What does he say? He's had to have said this 40 or 50 times just in the short time of this first half of this video. And I just can't really listen to it anymore. There's no question that anonymous mass lawyer has made some very strong arguments in his various articles. Now, I don't know where Brother Counsel chose and picked to pick on, on this here. These were not the more interesting arguments that I've heard from anonymous mass lawyer. But to look at that stuff there and say that he's not a lawyer, there's nothing that you could conclude from that. And especially given what he called a trick about the at the beginning, which tells me that I don't even think Martin has watched a trial on TV, let alone been in a courtroom for one. Do you guys? So, all right. So let me get back to you guys. Do you guys think Martin sounds like someone who's been in a courtroom? And Thomas, thank you very much for the memberships. Do you guys feel that Martin is a trial lawyer? What do you guys think? So, Ola, does he seem like a trial lawyer to you? Would you hire him to defend you? Would you hire him to defend you? If your life was on the line, does this guy really sound like someone who's seen the inside of a courtroom? And I'm asking honestly, I mean, does that when he says that, when he said at the beginning that it was a trick, asking people to choose a theory, I don't really did you understand what is he even saying? I mean, clearly it's the job of the prosecution to present their theory, and at some point it is the job of of a jury to weigh those competing theories. That's what goes on in every trial. It seemed really strange that he didn't seem to understand that. He tried to call that a trap. I don't claim to be a lawyer, Ola. But I think what I'm saying is logical. You don't understand what argument? He's trying to say that it was a trap. Now, you go back, I've read every anonymous, first of all, the way he describes anonymous mass articles. I've never seen one article where anonymous mass lawyer says that he thinks it's the jury's job to look at all the theories and pick which one is most probable. Nobody ever said that. Nobody ever said that. It completely misrepresents what went on in that courtroom or any courtroom. I just don't think he's ever been in. First of all, I don't think he's a criminal lawyer, and I don't think he's ever been inside a courtroom doing criminal, even seen a criminal case. Thank you to 646. I'm proud to say that I gained 6 pounds in the last 3 weeks, and I've been hitting the gym every time I can get there. Who believes it's me? Somebody believe? I know a lot of people think anonymous is me, or oh, you're thinking that Martin does? No, I told Martin I'm not. Oh, you would hire him? Come on, for what? Real estate? Jesus. This is again where I have to. I'm not. I've seen you kind of trolling here a little bit, Ola, but I mean, come on. Nobody would hire this guy as a lawyer if your life was on the line. Nobody would. I would have no problem hiring Alan Jackson if my life was on the line. I do think he's a good lawyer. I would have no long problem hiring David Yannetti as my lawyer. So I'm not being biased here. I'm saying this guy's not. I believe he's a lawyer, but he's definitely not someone you'd want representing you in any kind of a serious case, because I don't think he has even a basic understanding of how a criminal trial works. I'm making a logical argument. This is I'm only saying, in fact, I'm only saying this because he's making this accusation against anonymous masked lawyer all the time. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it. But I do believe that for him to say that about the choosing the theory trick was so absurd that I don't think any criminal lawyer would make that argument, or anybody that even watches TV. You've watched Law and Order, right? I've watched it. That's not how it works. Lawyer, no, is an extremely smart kid, a guy. He's an articulate guy. It comes down to truth seeking. It comes down to being aware of what so, for instance, Martin recognized today in the early part of this video, I didn't play it, but that people might want to be anonymous, some of these lawyers, because of the mob and going after you on social media. And he recognized it was legitimate to be anonymous. But what he doesn't want to know is that the mob that's doing that is led by Turtle Boy. And I don't say that just because I've been a victim of it, but that's what they do to everybody they disagree with. They try to dig for dirt and destroy you. I don't do that. People send me dirt and I don't use it ever. It's not how I do it. And so if you're going to pander to Turtle Boy, which I do think Martin has done, and I do think that lawyer does and did recently, then you're part of the problem, because what the Turtle Boy crowd is the enemy of free speech. It's the enemy of civil dialogue. It's the enemy of logic. It's the enemy of the idea of civil discourse. The idea that anybody you disagree with, the first thing you should do is go digging for dirt on them. And if you can't find any, then you make stuff up about him, like that he's faking cancer. And I wish I was faking cancer over the last year, what I've been through. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying I'm not faking cancer. And I never brought up the cancer. They were the ones that brought it up, because they went digging for dirt and they found old stuff that I did 6 years ago. 6 years ago. And that's what that crowd does. And it's important, however you feel about the Karen Reed case, to stand up to that crowd. Now, for whatever reason, and I don't trust his reasons, Young Jerks and Mike Crawford has found his courage to stand up to them now. I don't think it's for the right reasons. if it was for the right reasons, they would have done it a long time ago. But you do it because of the tactics that they use and trying to dig for dirt. His pit bull there, Jen Altman, digging for dirt. That's what they all did. As soon as someone is an enemy of theirs, they go, not even an enemy, just someone that disagrees with them, they go digging for dirt. And they went digging into my background to see what they could find. They found nothing. So they started making up stuff. They tried to connect me to a bar in the late 90s called Walsh's on Main Street in Worcester that I never owned or had any connection to. Never worked there. I only went in there once just because it was a new hot bar. I went in to check it out and I never went back. I had no connection to it, but they tried to connect me to it because there was an employee there that was putting roofies in girls' drinks and bringing them up to the office and molesting them. It's terrible. And the bar got shut down for that reason. But the pit bull said, well, maybe we can throw Kevin into that narrative. And she did. And that's what they try to do. So when they sit there and now Lindsay, oh, we got dirt on Kevin. That's what they got. There's no dirt on me. I had no connection to that bar. That's how they play it. And this is how they do it with everybody. I just stood up to them. And I'm not going to be intimidated by them. But a lot of people, most people don't want to do that, including most lawyers. So this is a time when you have a mob like this, and it is a mindless mob. It really is. And when it's a cruel, mindless mob that is the enemy of civil society. And if you believe in civil discourse, if you believe in freedom of speech, you stand up to that mob. You do what you can to expose it. It's important. Unfortunately, we see very few people with the courage to do it. And, it's sad. It's one of the things that's made me sad about this whole case. It left me with a bad feeling, this whole case. Part of a couple of things, one of it is the cruelty that I saw that mob in what was being poured on the witnesses. They enjoyed that cruelty, the way they enjoyed the cruelty. They sat back and cheered it like in the Roman Colosseum days. They enjoyed it. That bothered me a lot. And the way nobody has the courage to stick up and say, this is not like Tiananmen Square when that guy stood in front of a tank. Nobody's life is on the line here. You stand up to this mob, what you're going to get is a little ridiculous ridicule inside social media. That's it. And if that's the heaviest price we're going to pay, no one can have the courage to stand up to this mob. Are you kidding me? Is that the kind of people we live in with this state? I hate to say it, but yes, where you have a combination of people that enjoy the cruelty to innocent people and other people that don't enjoy it, but don't have the courage to stand up to it. Bothers me. Grant is days or weeks away from becoming free Karen Reed. He's going wherever Lindsay goes. He's now cheering on Turtle Boy because Lindsay's back with Turtle Boy. Grant is a fool. He always has been. And I'm sorry to say that because he does have a brain that if you focused it could do some very interesting things. But he's not a truth seeker either. He's going to do whatever it takes to make Lindsay happy. And it's sad. He's very close now. Any day now, he will be becoming free Karen Reed again. He's very close to that flipping. And there's no excuse for it. Just looking through chat. So, let's try to keep it civil in chat. Yeah, those charges against Turtle Boy, which I never talked about the ones involving Lindsay because I knew she was a bad witness. And everybody will back me up that I've always taken that position with Kate, with everybody. Nope, don't want anything to do with her. And I never talked about those charges on this channel for that reason. It was a he said, she said at best, where the she was very unreliable at best. And that was back then. And now we know, and she's back with him. So Grant's never been committed to the truth. This is when I started with back in January of 2024. I was the one that kind of discovered Grant. He had been tweeting about the Turtle Boy case because he had been in court. So I had him on my show a couple of times. And then at the time, he said, I don't really know anything about the Karen Reed case. But within weeks, he was presenting himself as the authority on the Karen Reed case. But all the information, the only real information he had came from either me or Kate. And he started tweeting crazy things. Now, at the time, it was stuff that was helpful to our side, if you want to say our, in the sense that to the extent that I had become pro prosecution's argument. But I'm for the truth. And after he kept putting this stuff out there, and I couldn't imagine who his sources were, and I didn't think it sounded true to me. And I would go and I would try to find out, and I could never back up anything he was saying. And so finally I called Kate up and I said, what is the deal with Grant? And she says, I don't know. She goes, I thought you could tell me. I mean, I don't know where he's getting this stuff from. So he was basically just making stuff up. And that was good enough to get him on Roberta's show. But I had enough of it. So to me, I don't care what side you're on. You have to report the truth. You can't just make stuff up and then connect dots weirdly and come out with strange theories that don't make any sense. You can't do that. No, he doesn't have a good heart. I'm sorry, Troy. He just doesn't. He's not right in the mind. I don't have, Roberta lies all the time. She's out there. I mean, again, you don't want to get into these wars. And I don't know if you should bring it up, but I mean, it's like weird lying too, like lying that you can disprove just by watching the video and saying it doesn't make sense. It's really strange. And she goes after everybody. Now she's going after the four ladies too. I already forgot it again. It doesn't make sense. I watched an 8-minute section of the Lawyer You Know interview with Megyn Kelly. I don't know if there was a longer version. The one I saw, maybe the one I saw was the whole version, and it was an 8-minute thing. And bothered me the way he was pandering to Megyn Kelly about Turtle Boy and misdescribing what Turtle Boy is, as though he's just a reporter. No, he's not. He was never a reporter on this case. Never was an investigator. He was an advocate from day one. He was fed a theory by the defense, and he should only be described as a defense advocate. If you want to describe, so like Nick Rocco would not describe himself as a reporter. So I consider Nick to be more honest. Nick would say, no, I'm a friend of Karen. I'm a Karen advocate. That's what Turtle Boy was from day one. And he should have never described himself as anything else. And nobody who's honest should ever describe him as anything else. And this is why I can't stand, what's her name on Channel 10 there, who was in the documentary with me, with the glasses. Looks like a larger version of Rachel Maddow. I forget her name, but these people falsely described Turtle Boy as some kind of loud reporter. No. He was never a reporter, a journalist, an investigator on this. Sue O'Connell, that's her name. So between Sue O'Connell and Lawyer You Know falsely describing him, it's unacceptable to me. No, you got to describe him as to what he is. Just be honest about what he is. You mean the new book, Suzanne? The other book does have an Audible, and actually he's one of the top. One thing they did spare no expense on was to bring in one of the top book narrators you can get. I haven't heard it myself, obviously, because they didn't send me a copy. So, and I'm not paying $15 for my own book. But there is an Audible on my book. If you're talking about the new book, that I don't know. I'm just starting it. Yeah, first of all, he's not a reporter. He's not a journalist. He may have done journalism on other cases. I'm not saying he hasn't, but on this case here, he's an advocate. So it's false to describe him as anything else, right, Tuesday? And he's not just rough around the edges. He was generating content for his channel to create cruel entertainment by going after the witnesses. That's what he was. And he said, I'm going to hound them to the end of the earth until they change their testimony, essentially. That's not just rough around the edges. Thank you, Karen. And Happy New Year to you, too. And he led a rolling rally with over 100 people where he shows up into your neighborhood at a house with this large mob and I don't know how many dozens of cars. And he has a bullhorn and he's shouting at the neighbors and shouting at the house saying that they're murderers inside. Come on. That's not just rough around the edges. Is my book actually at Barnes & Noble? I didn't even know that it was. I have no control over the pricing. I would bring the pricing down. I've never made a penny off it. It's a small publisher, Wild Blue Press, and the way they do it, they charge expenses after on sales where we split. So both me, but they take my portions out of the profits off the book. And so far they have not sent me a penny. I don't know what the expenses went towards. Obviously paying the audiobook was a big one. Are you going to be on tomorrow night, Tuesday? Who's going to be on from the Fantastic Four? Tuesday is going to be on. So, and Tuesday we've chatted many times privately, and she's been on my show once or twice. And Ginny, you're going to be on too. So we'll have a big crowd tomorrow night. The name of the book is called Storm of Suspicion. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, I believe it's on that, so you can get it for free. So get the free version. But I want to do it. My new book that I've already started working on is called Strange Witnesses. At least that's my title for it for now. You can tell me if you like it. But it's basically about witnesses. And so key witnesses and famous trials that those witnesses ended up being suspect. Their testimony ended up being suspect. So I wonder if it's in the actual bookstore at Barnes & Noble. That would be cool. I also love going to bookstores. That was, back in the before Amazon days. I love going into a bookstore. And I like the bigger ones like Barnes & Noble. You get lost in those places. Yeah. Troy, I would. Yeah, I'm always like, I feel kind of awkward about that, but sure. So, anyways, I wanted strange witnesses. I don't know if you guys think that's an interesting topic, but witnesses in famous cases whose, for whatever one reason or another, their testimony became suspicious. So we got a couple in the Karen Reed case, but there's also at least a couple in the O.J. Simpson case. I've been actually doing some research into the famous Jeffrey McDonald case, Dr. Jeffrey McDonald, very, very one of the most famous true crime cases of all time. There's been a lot of big documentaries done on it and stuff. And to my surprise, thank you, Deb, appreciate it. To my surprise, I was reading the defense witness testimony, several of the witnesses the other day, and I'm going to go over it on the channel because I do believe Dr. McDonald did commit the crimes, but the witness testimony, the defense witness testimony, does actually trouble me, and some of it was from police officers too, that really backed up their main witness that had kind of said that he had been in the house and matched the description of what, and that her friends had killed this woman and her kids. But then she wouldn't say that on the stand. She just said she didn't remember. But the testimony is kind of weird. So I want to run this by you guys. I think you guys will enjoy it for the intellectual challenge of it. But so yeah, witnesses in these cases end up being, it can be on both sides, right? There's a long history of bad experts or other witnesses that have sent innocent people to jail. So I want to get those too. So if anybody has in mind themselves some kind of a relatively high profile trial where there's a witness like that you think would be interesting, it could be an expert witness that was bought and paid for, like in the OJ case, or it could be or I would say Dr. Wolf, very suspicious, or Dr. Russell. I'm not sure I'm going to include them in the book, but I know I want to include a chapter on Officer Barrows. I find his testimony to be, I don't think he was lying, but I find his testimony to be strange and interesting and shows what can happen in these high celebrity cases. And it shows why people can be pretty unreliable as witnesses. And Officer Barrows, something that the FKR doesn't really know is that really pretty much was undone by the cross-examination, which caused him to reverse. They don't seem to know that. They must have not watched that part. But yes, Stokely. She was a druggie, and she said her boyfriend did it. Her boyfriend had also confessed at other times to different people, but he had never, he was not a witness at the trial. But what surprised me was they did have multiple witnesses, some of them police, who she had told her story to. And she had told her story to the prosecution. But then the next day on the stand, she wouldn't say it again on the stand. All she would say was she didn't know where she was between 12 and 5 a.m. So, but she was, had been for 10 years a major drug addict on heroin. So that, could have deeply impacted her testimony. And I think the conclusion of the court was basically that, yeah, her testimony was unreliable because of that. Trying to read through the chat. There's multiple conversations going on in chat, so I got to be careful. I don't know which. It's if you jump in, sometimes you can respond to something that was out of context. No, there'll be no libel. You just talk about the evidence. You talk about the testimony. That's all. There's no libel. And like I said, I don't believe that Officer Barrows lied. So there's no libel. But we can just talk about the fact that he reversed his testimony on the stand under cross-examination, where when he was shown the picture of the taillight at 5:08, he said, yes, that was consistent with what he saw in the Sally report, which is the opposite of what he had been saying just moments before under direct examination by the defense. And then he was shown the image of the taillight from the dash cam video at 8:22. And again, he had to say, yes, that is consistent with what I saw, which one of the most dramatic moments of the trial was when he told Alan Jackson that what he saw himself that afternoon was totally different than what the image he was seeing in the Sally report. But he reversed on that. It's just not something that FKR really knows about. Well, Troy asked if we think there were hidden FKR. Which am I hidden? I think there were people on the jury, and clearly even that one from Prada is her name, right, from Brazil. She clearly had been influenced by. She admitted to. I think her name was another one. One of the other jurors had admitted to watching the documentary, but Prada was clearly influenced by social media before that trial began. And I know for a fact in the first trial that it happened, and the woman got thrown off right near the end of the trial. But I know the whole story, and she was going into bars, getting drunk during the trial when she was a juror, and I know the story in overwhelming details. She can sue me if she wants because I know I don't mention her name. I do know it. I've never said it, but this was in the first trial, and she was going into bars and saying, I'm on the jury and I'm going to get Karen off because I'm free Karen Reed. And she even, I think, described in one incident said she was a turtle rider, and that time would prove after the trial she was closely in touch with Turtle Rider. And when I even talked about the case, talked about the incident involving her without mentioning her name, who'd she go running to right away? To Turtle. So, yeah, I don't see if it happened in the first trial, why wouldn't it happen in the second trial? So that doesn't mean that, but you did have to get 12 jurors to agree to the acquittal. So, and I really doubt that all 12 jurors were influenced. So no, but I believe some of them were influenced. Thank you, Oa. The Thin Blue Line by Morris. Let me pause to write it down. I mean, there's no question that there are plenty of people in jail historically and are still in jail now that were convicted by witnesses that were wrong, that were, in some cases corruptly or just influenced by the prosecution or the police in a way that led to innocent people going to jail. That's definitely a part of life. And so I don't sit here and someone accused me in a comment the other day of saying that I'm pro police corruption. I'm like, what are you, crazy? I mean, who's pro police corruption? I don't have any cops in the family. I don't start out thinking there's no police corruption here, and I didn't. I started out thinking there could be. And you look at the evidence, every case is different and unique. Frankie Figs, I haven't seen you in a long time. What constitutes a strange witness? So maybe that's not a great title, but what I'm looking at, tell me if this makes sense to you, is a witness, could be for the prosecution or the defense, could be an expert, or it could be a fact witness, or also known as a lay witness, whose testimony played a key role in the trial, but that testimony is suspect. So it could be as simple as an expert witness that seems to have been bought off. Or it could be something else. Like in the case of Barrows, he was seems to have been starstruck by Karen Reed and by Alan Jackson. He wanted to impress them, or maybe he wanted to impress the mob. And it impacted his memory to the point where he falsely described in the first trial. He told in the second trial that he had said the same thing about that picture being different in the first trial, but he had said no such thing. And I remember watching it as soon as he testified that. I was like, no, he didn't say that in the first trial. And sure enough, Hank Brennan asked him again, did you say that? And he said, yes. And Hank Brennan gave him the transcript and said, take your time and read it. And then he said, now, did you say that? And he said, no, I didn't. So was he lying? Well, I mean, if you're Karen Reed people, yeah, he's lying. They like to go to lie. No, I don't. He could have been, but I don't believe he was lying. I believe he had a false memory. He developed a false memory because he wanted to, for whatever reason, he wanted to impress. He fell in with the mob and wanted to impress them. Or maybe just started watching social media and started believing the conspiracy, or, but seeing his role within that, it's hard. Look, you see Lucky carried out on the shoulders of the mob, now listen, plenty of people look at things like that and they don't want to be involved. They don't want to go near it. But other people want to be a hero to a mob like that. And this is a problem this is why I say it has to be a high profile case, because you get this in a lot of high profile cases. And I also think Dever is an interesting one too. And I might do a chapter on her, Troy, but I do think she's someone that I think it was the same thing, to tell you the truth. I think she was initially came forward, wanted to be a hero to that mob, and said that she remembered seeing Chief Berkowitz and Higgins that day near the Lexus in the Sallyport. But then eventually she was confronted with evidence that showed her, no, you couldn't have because you weren't there. And then she changed her testimony. So yes, she changed her testimony because she was shown the evidence that what she had said before couldn't have been true. So that's why she changed it. But why did she originally have that memory? I think it's because she wanted to impress that mob. She got sucked up with the conspiracy theory too. And that's what happens. Let me write that one down. I never heard of it, Frankie. The McStay trial. That's an interesting name. I never heard of that one. Let me write that down. All right. Thank you, Frankie. So tomorrow is 7:00. Yep. Don't forget to send me the link, guys. And I guess this StreamYard is going to be soon to be known as Bending Spoons. Yeah, I think there is whatever. People get swept up. Look, if to some degree it's normal. Let's say a murder happens out in front of your house and you didn't see it. You were in bed sleeping, but maybe you heard something. There is a tendency to want to say you saw something or you heard something. And it's not about lying, but it's just everybody. If it's a high profile murder, this is the big moment in their life. It's the big moment in that town's life. And this is what happened in the Lizzie Borden case too, in some cases. And it happened in the other one that I read was the killer from the train, where an axe murderer was going. This was around 1908, was traveling on trains and hopping off into little towns and murdering whole families. And in that town's life, that was the big event of their whole history. And that town, there was no national media back then, really, or so there's certainly no TV and radio. So you had that local town's newspaper story. That coverage of it was big. That was their town's life. And so in those cases, a lot of people were falsely convicted in some of those towns of being the axe murderer. And it was because that pressure that came from the media, from wanting to, from a theory would get built up by the police. Somebody would be falsely accused, and the newspapers would be all over it, and the town would be all talking about it. And so in that situation, it's not unusual for someone who wants attention to emerge. It's not necessarily something, I don't think it's usually something conscious that they do. They don't make a decision like, oh, it's not like they sit there and say, I want to be a hero here. No, it's a human thing that goes on. Oh, it says we create our memories each time we remember them. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is and I've studied this a lot, and it is an interesting phenomenon to me, the way human memory is formed, the way it's created, the way it's influenced. Absolutely. It's the way our brains work. And it's very fallible, and it's open to influence. It's open to all kinds of events. Turtle Boy said in his show that he takes full credit for Barrows. He said he guaranteed the defense he would be a good witness for them. His words. So there must have been some communication between Barrows and Turtle Boy, if that's true. And Turtle Boy's mouth is the one that really sells people out, because this all right, this is great. This is great, because I want to bring let's get close to ending the show on this. But this is big. I've talked about this before, but it's been a while. So I want to remind you guys of this. Troy, if you're paying attention, this is something that's really interesting. Turtle Boy is apparently, if he's telling the truth, had some communications with Barrows that never came out. If that came out, I mean, that really kind of shows, Barrows was asked questions about that. So if he had communications with Turtle Boy and didn't admit it on the stand, well, he lied under oath. Barrows could be in some trouble there if what Turtle Boy said was true. If Barrows had communications with Turtle Boy, Barrows could be charged with perjury. It's a pretty serious thing. And yet Turtle Boy was willing to sell him down the road. He could brag about it. So this is the degree that Turtle Boy will normally go when it comes to bragging about something. Right? That's the Turtle Boy ego. We all get it. We all anticipate it. But there's an exception here. And this is what I'm going to talk about. I've talked about it before. So I have revealed on this show, different times in the past, that the U.S. Attorney's Office, led by Josh Levy, at the time, the U.S. Attorney, very, very powerful position, Adam Deach, and I forget the name of the other one. Thank you, Kerry. And sorry, I just wanted to put Kerry to say thank you. Thank you, Kerry. And so when they questioned the witnesses in front of the federal grand jury, some of them, they used a blow up version of TB Daily News. And when I revealed this on this show on purpose, I wanted Turtle Boy to take the bait. I wanted him to start bragging about that, because if he did, the feds were going to have to answer as to why they did that. Because Turtle Boy's got a much more massive audience than me. So if I say it, it doesn't really, it's like a tree falling in the forest when no one's around, right? But if Turtle Boy says it, that makes it hard for the U.S. Attorney's Office to ignore, because you're talking about thousands of people hearing it, right? Someone has to respond to it. So I put that out there hoping he would take the bait. He didn't. I put it out there more loudly. He still didn't take it. Put it out there more loudly. He still didn't take it. I'm like, what is going on? So certainly he knows about it. And at some point, someone asked him a question. I forget if it was on Twitter. I think it was on Twitter, but it might have been on one of his shows. I don't remember. Why don't you talk about that? And he said, and he gave some kind of excuses. Well, I'll talk about that when Kevin talks about Kate or something like that. Whatever. It was something silly. But he knew that I've reported this, and Turtle Boy watches the show a lot. He comments in chat, but Turtle Boy wouldn't brag about this. Why would Turtle Boy? I ask you, why would Turtle Boy not brag about the fact that the U.S. Attorney's Office used his blog to question the witnesses? And to this day, he won't brag about it. He won't mention it. Why not? We know that it happened, but why not? Now, the theories, there were two possibilities that we had at the time. So, for instance, Kate and I talked about it. And I think she leaned towards one and I leaned towards the other. One possibility was that Karen had asked Turtle Boy not to talk about it. And that was very reasonable because Karen has obviously a close relationship with the feds, an improper relationship with the feds. And so she wouldn't have wanted him to talk about the fact that the feds use TV Daily News to question the witnesses. The other possibility was that Turtle Boy has some kind of communication himself. He has some kind of channel to the feds. And the feds didn't want that exposed. And he didn't want that exposed. So that's why he couldn't brag about it. Well, now at this point, Turtle Boy is kind of at war with Karen to some degree. And so there's no way that the first explanation makes sense anymore. Turtle Boy's not being quiet about this because Karen has told him to, because he's not listening to Karen anymore, which leaves only one possibility. And that is that the feds had some kind of communication with Turtle Boy. And I believe that. I don't know what it is. It's, and I can't speculate as to what exactly that community. I don't believe that he's a CI. I don't believe he's an informant. It's possible, but I know people believe that, but I don't believe he was. I don't believe it would, because there'll be paperwork for that. And I think this would be a relationship. I don't think they would want, the feds would want, when you become an informant, there's paperwork, there's a process. And I don't think anybody would want to be tied to Turtle Boy in that way. So what you would have would be more of a clandestine back channel relationship. Because someone like Turtle Boy is useful to the feds because they like to leak to social media. And Turtle Boy is an influencer on YouTube and on social media. And the feds love to play the game with the media. They always have. The FBI has long leaked to the media, talking about the national FBI. So this is the same thing that will be getting played by sneaky people like Adam Deitch, who's now running for Maury's seat, and Josh Levy. So to me, that is the only logical conclusion as to why Turtle Boy doesn't brag about the fact that the U.S. attorney himself stood there in front of witnesses with a blow-up of TV Daily News, who everybody in the room knew was hounding those witnesses and knew what message it would send those witnesses. It was basically sending those witnesses a message saying, we're all on the same team. Deitch knew that. Levy knew that. And Turtle Boy doesn't want to brag about this. This cannot be ignored. This is very important. All right. So everybody, thanks for being here. And I will see everybody on the four tops, whatever. I mean, it's going through chat. God, I can't. My brain doesn't work. What is it? The four what? The four ladies? The four square? What is it? Forensics? Oh, forensics. It must be that, right? Forensics. I got it. Forensics. I believe it's. So I will see everybody on the forensics channel tomorrow night at 7:00. So join us there for Kerry and Ginny and Julie and Tuesday. I think I got it right that time, right? Tuesday? Did I get it right that time? Forensic room. Okay, got it. Oh my God. It's so easy to remember. What is wrong with me? I don't know. There's something wrong with my brain. It's getting worse. But you can see I just got done my chemo treatment today at 5 or 5:30, and I feel great. So totally used to it now. It doesn't do anything to me. So everything's going very well. Gaining weight, hitting the gym. I'm the healthiest guy around. So doing guy. Thank you, guys. So we will see you tomorrow night.